Chapter 23-22. As Yen Aoshuang and the other four began to form their hand seals, the yuan qi in the air began to churn. A powerful storm that was brewing was gradually taking shape. At this level, the destructive power of a martial skill unleashed by a single cultivator was already extremely shocking. When the five of them unleashed their skills together, the destructive power would definitely be a shocking storm. The tree vines seemed to have sensed the impending danger, and their attacks instantly became even more frenzied. Instantly, the intensity of the attacks that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other four had to endure greatly increased. Countless tree vines circled in front of them like the tentacles of an evil spirit, trying to take their lives. Suddenly, Li Yangbing was unable to dodge in time and was once again dragged away by the tree vines, revealing an empty space. The tree vines were clearly intelligent. It knew that Li Yangbing was the weakest person in the group, and it was undoubtedly the easiest way to create an opening through him. When the other disciples saw that Li Yangbing had been dragged away, their expressions instantly turned ugly. Under such circumstances, they simply could not split themselves to save Li Yangbing. Furthermore, such a large opening would directly affect the 5 cultivators inside. Once the martial skill unleashed this time failed, it would be even more difficult to try again later on. Save me! Save me! Li Yangbing was dragged into the darkness just like that. An indescribable fear surrounded him. Now, he no longer had any ability to resist. If his teammates did not come to save him, only death would await him. Everyone's expressions were extremely ugly. They really could not split themselves up in this situation. Xiao He, Xiao Bai, go! The moment they saw that Li Yangbing had been entangled by the tree vines, Bailey Hongzhuang had already ordered Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Previously, she had not allowed Xiao He and Xiao Bai to participate in the battle of the encirclement. This was so that they could immediately fill in the gaps if they encountered a situation like this. Li Yangbing was their teammate. Naturally, they could not give up on him. Yes. Xiao He and Xiao Bai replied in unison. In the next moment, under everyone's astonished gazes, Xiao He and Xiao Bai's figures quickly grew larger. Xiao He leaped and quickly filled in the gap between Li Yangbing, and Xiao Bai immediately went to rescue Li Yangbing. The 2 beasts' sharp claws also left their bodies. As they brandished their claws, the tree vines snapped. The crowd stared in shock at the 2 beasts that had suddenly grown larger. They were so frightened that their hearts almost stopped. They thought that something else had appeared. However, after realizing that the 2 demonic beasts that had suddenly grown bigger were the 2 guys that had been sitting on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders, they were already shocked to the point that they couldn't be more shocked. Originally, they didn't care about these 2 guys, but Pei Yifan had told them that Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contract beasts weren't simple. Everyone naturally believed that Bai Shi's abilities were not simple. However, these 2 contracted beasts were too small. They did not have the slightest bit of deterrence. It was unbelievable. No one had expected these 2 contracted beasts to have such heaven-defying abilities. Their figures had grown larger directly? They had never seen such contracted beasts in all their lives. They were really pretending to be pigs to eat tigers. Li Yangbing originally thought that he was going to lose his life just like that. Suddenly, he saw a pitch-black figure approaching, and the despair in his heart grew. He had already been drained of his blood. Now that another beast had appeared, he had no choice but to die. Chapter 23-23. Only when the black demonic beast brought Li Yangbing back to the team did Li Yangbing realize that it was Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast. It had gone there to save him. Li Yangbing was extremely grateful to Bailey Hongzhuang for saving his life. If Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't saved him, he would have been dead by now. At the same time, the 5 of them had finished forming their seals. As the 5 of them attacked in all directions, an earth-shattering explosion resounded through heaven and earth. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had already covered their ears with their elemental energy. Hence, they weren't affected at all. Along with the display of the martial skill, The surrounding area was instantly illuminated by the light. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were able to clearly see the situation around them. The tree vines seemed to be extending from the inside of the forest. It could be seen that the roots of the tree vines were still within the forest. Just by looking at them, they were able to extend so many tree vines. As for how terrifying the tree itself was, everyone felt that it was hard to imagine. Following the sound of the explosion, the surrounding tree vines were directly blown apart and turned into nothingness. Following that, everyone noticed that the tree vines were quickly escaping into the forest. Young Palace Master, should we chase after them and take a look? Long Xianjing asked. Long Xianjing was the strongest person in Limitless Palace's team other than Bailey Hongzhuang. Normally, he was very respected in Limitless Palace. However, he didn't speak much and wasn't cold either. Bailey Hongzhuang originally wanted to chase after them to take a look. However, after seeing the injuries of the other cultivators, she decided to put the idea aside for the time being. Many of our teammates are injured. Currently, the most important thing is to heal their injuries. When the sun rises, we will go in and take a look. Not to mention the other cultivators who were injured, Li Yangbing's injuries were the most serious. If he didn't rest well, he might not be able to continue the operation tomorrow. Since they had come together to participate in the Battle of Zhuolu, they were a team. They definitely couldn't leave any of the cultivators behind. Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone's gaze fell on the injured cultivator and they nodded. Although they couldn't see the situation of the tree vines, Bailey Hongzhuang's consideration of everyone still made everyone very happy. If the captain only focused on fighting and didn't care about the situation of the cultivators, then they would be even more disappointed. That tree vine has also suffered heavy injuries. I believe that it won't attack again tonight. After the battle just now, everyone has lost a lot of energy. Rest at ease and I will keep watch. Young Palace Master, let me keep watch. Long Xianjing said. No matter what, Bailey Hongzhuang was a woman and her physical strength was not as good as a man's. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and shook her head. I'm fine. The battle just now didn't consume much of my energy. Besides, I'm very sensitive to some sounds and was able to detect it immediately. Everyone, don't decline. Seize the time and rest well. In this Battle of Zhuolu, we might encounter danger at any time. Everyone needs to be in their best condition for battle. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was gentle and dignified, not allowing anyone to refuse. Everyone thought for a while before circulating their cultivation techniques to recover. Chapter 23-24. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang had predicted, there was no more danger in the latter half of the night. When the sky gradually brightened, everyone's heart finally relaxed. Although the battle with the tree vines was soul-stirring, everyone's injuries were mostly superficial. As for the matter of their blood being sucked, everyone could only use the blood-forming pill to recover. Fortunately, before participating in the Battle of Zhuolu, everyone had prepared a lot of pills in case of emergency. These pills were all prepared by Limitless Palace for them. When fighting for glory for the palace would never be stingy. They had prepared all the pills that they could possibly need. Under such circumstances, everyone's recovery speed was also very fast. Long Xianjing and the others withdrew from their cultivation state. After the battle last night, everyone's relationship had become much closer. After all, every cultivator who was entangled by the tree vines was rescued by their teammate. Therefore, many of the barriers and grudges had gradually disappeared under such circumstances. After the incident last night, everyone's opinion of Bailey Hongzhuang had changed again. Not to mention that they didn't discover anything before, Bailey Hongzhuang and her contracted beasts were able to discover danger at the first moment. This proved that Bailey Hongzhuang's vigilance was much stronger than theirs. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang's other two demonic beasts were also very shocking existences. Although they had now returned to their cute and petite appearance, no one dared to look down on these two contracted beasts. The battle strength that they had displayed yesterday was also very shocking. Now, everyone completely understood why Bailey Hongzhuang was able to become the palace master's young palace master. At least, the gap between them and Bailey Hongzhuang was not just a little bit. There was always someone better than you. This sentence was not wrong at all. Bailey Hongzhuang was not only talented, she was also very strong. Her brain was also very smart. Under such a chaotic situation last night, Bailey Hongzhuang was still able to command them calmly. There was no need to doubt her leadership. She was such an outstanding woman, yet her personality was not as arrogant and despotic as the other geniuses. At this moment they were truly convinced. Everyone took some dry rations and started eating. Last night's consumption was huge, and today they were really hungry. After everyone finished eating, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at everyone and said, "How is everyone's recovery?" "There's no problem," everyone said. Sure enough, the exhaustion on everyone's faces had completely dissipated, and they had recovered their spirited appearance. As a cultivator's strength increased, his body's recovery ability also increased. Ordinary injuries could be healed very quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on Li Yangbing's body. She could see that Li Yangbing still looked a little weak. Last night, he had used up too much of his energy. Although the hematopoietic pill could increase the speed of his blood production, it could not restore all his blood in a short period of time. "Li Yangbing, how do you feel?" "Young Palace Master, don't worry. I can keep up with everyone. I'm fine." Li Yangbing felt a wave of guilt in his heart. Usually, he was also a very strong fighter. He did not expect that in the Battle of Zhuolu, he would drag everyone down. He was really embarrassed. Chapter 23-25. Hearing everyone's words of concern, Li Yangbing hurriedly waved his hand. "Everyone, don't worry. I'm fine now." Although his body was still weak, it did not affect his movement. "Li Yangbing, when we're moving, don't do anything. Rest well." Bailey Hongzhuang's beautiful face was filled with a caring smile. She could also see Li Yangbing's current state. As long as he did not do anything later, it would not affect him much. "Thank you, young palace mistress." Li Yangbing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang gratefully. He did not want to drag everyone down because of him. "Since that's the case, let's set off. Let's see what the vines that attacked us yesterday were." Bailey Hongzhuang turned around and looked in the direction where the vines had gone last night. There were still many bloodstains on the ground, so it was easy for them to track them down. Long Xianjing and the rest had a serious expression on their faces. Last night they were caught off guard and were ambushed. If it wasn't for the fact that their vision was obstructed in the dark, and the fact that the vines were blocking the moonlight, they wouldn't have been in such a sorry state. Today's weather was clear. They had to go and see what the vines from last night were. "I will definitely kill those evil things. After so many years, who knows how many people have been harmed by these vines." Yan Aoshuang's face was filled with anger. She had never been in such a sorry state since she had stepped on the path of cultivation. It was really infuriating. The things in this Battle of Zhuolu are really too strange. I have never heard of such things in this world. Pei Yifan frowned. He had thought that the Battle of Zhuolu did not mention anything about danger. He did not expect that they would see true danger on the first day of the Battle of Zhuolu. The strength of their team was extremely strong. If it had been any other team, facing the encirclement of the vines, they would have been completely annihilated. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest followed the bloodstains. Only then did they realize that the range of the vines was unexpectedly far. Originally, they were only at the outskirts of the forest. Now, they were following the bloodstains into the forest. The closer they got to the forest, the more their hearts sank. What kind of tree vines could extend to such a terrifying length? It was truly shocking. Finally, the group arrived at the nest of the tree vines. In their line of sight, a huge black tree appeared in everyone's line of sight. The size of this tree exceeded everyone's expectations. This was because the tree in front of them was so huge that it was comparable to a 3-story building. Countless vines twined around the tree. The winding and huge vines made everyone understand why the vines could extend so far last night. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw the tree vines, she suddenly understood. I understand why we didn't see any traces of demonic beasts along the way. I'm afraid it's because of the existence of these tree vines. Last night they had already seen the combat power of the tree vines. It was really too terrifying. If a monster beast was targeted by the tree vines, it would have no chance to escape and would be sucked dry. Chapter 23-26. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone's heart trembled. So this was the reason behind all of this. It seems like the blood that these tree vines have absorbed is not only from human cultivators, but also from demonic beasts. Long Xianjing looked at the terrifying tree vines in front of him. How many demonic beasts and cultivators' blood did it absorb to be able to develop to such a level? Everyone nodded their heads. The cultivators who had participated in the Battle of Zhuolu were all dragons and phoenixes among men. Even if they were ambushed by the tree vines, only a minority would lose their lives. However, the demonic beasts in this forest were in for a bad time. The Battle of Zhuolu is a small world created for cultivators like us. Normal dangers will not be able to pose much of an obstacle to us. So, the things here are probably not normal. We have to be more careful from now on. There are many things that cannot be seen through the eyes of the outside world. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly understood the crux of the matter. This Battle of Zhuolu was also a test for them. If there were only normal demonic beasts inside, it would mean that if she were to participate in the competition with her current strength, there would be no challenge at all. Instead, it would be like playing around. The various factions would obviously not let them have it so easy. It was likely that they were not the only ones who had encountered something like this. The other groups had also encountered something unusual. In reality, everything was just as Bailey Hongzhuang had predicted. Every group that had participated in the Battle of Zhuolu had encountered something unusual. After a huge battle, they were finally able to deal with it. Master, if this thing was created by the various factions to test us, could it be that the so-called treasure is related to this thing? Xiao Hei's eyes suddenly lit up. This thing was really too unusual. Previously, she had already heard that there were various treasures and opportunities in the Battle of Zhuolu. Now that she thought about it, these treasures were definitely not placed on the ground for you to obtain. If it was really that simple, what was the difference between it and picking it up for free? When everyone heard Xiao Hei's words, their eyes instantly lit up. Looks like we have to think of a way to deal with this strange tree. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a playful smile. Originally, they did not have the determination to kill this tree vine. This was because the tree vine did not look easy to deal with. Continuing to fight with it would only be a waste of energy. If there was a possibility that there was a treasure inside, then everything would be different. Suddenly, everyone looked at the big tree with a sharp gaze. No matter what, they had to get rid of this tree today. Only after taking care of the tree would they know if their guess was correct or not. If he was right, then the more difficult it was to deal with, the more precious the treasure behind it would be. Let's work together to kill these giant trees. What do you all think? Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at everyone. Although she was the leader of the team, she still needed to seek everyone's opinion on such matters. Young Palace Master, we agree. Everyone expressed their stance. Last night they had been tortured by this giant tree for half a day. Today they had a reason to kill it. Naturally, they would not refuse. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and looked at Li Yongbing. Li Yongbing, you haven't fully recovered yet. Do what you can. Chapter 23-27. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were still some distance away from the giant tree. Hence, the giant tree had not taken the initiative to attack Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest. Once the group had made their decision, they immediately walked towards the giant tree. As the group approached, the vines on the giant tree began to twist and turn rapidly. Upon closer inspection, the group could see that there were wounds on the vines. It was obvious that they had been inflicted by their attacks last night. Without waiting for the group to take the initiative to attack, the giant tree acted as if it had seen its enemy the moment it saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest. The vines that filled the sky immediately attacked them. "Everyone, be careful. The vine's nest is here. I'm afraid that their power will be even more frightening." Bailey Hongzhuang left them with a warning and began the battle. They wanted to completely destroy the giant tree. The other cultivators reacted quickly as well. Normally, they were all capable of holding their own. Although the giant tree in front of them was strange in every way, destroying it was still very simple. It was simple and crude. They just had to directly blow it up. Surging yuan qi whizzed out from the group's body. After last night's experience, everyone had a certain level of tacit understanding. A portion of the cultivators were responsible for dealing with the vines while the others directly used large-scale destructive martial arts technique. All they had to do was to directly blow the giant tree to pieces. After Bailey Hongzhuang had exchanged blows with the vines, she realized that the vine's power was much stronger than last night. It was obvious that the closer the distance, the stronger the combat power of the vines. The giant tree naturally knew what Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were thinking. The vines extended outwards and swept wildly towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest, intending to bind Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest so that they could not move. As all the vines came down from the giant tree, the group was shocked to find that there was a human face on the giant tree's trunk. Seeing this, everyone could not help but stare blankly. "Oh my God, what the hell is this thing? This tree has really become a spirit. Does it matter if we kill it? What's there to be afraid of? This fellow has lived for so many years. It's not strange for it to become like this. Who knows, the treasure behind it might be extremely powerful." As cultivators, most of them were fearless people. Originally, cultivation was to defy the heavens and change one's fate. A cultivator's lifespan would continuously increase along with their cultivation. Hence, there were many things that everyone did not care about. Boom! Boom boom! One attack after another rapidly formed in the group's hands. Without hesitation, they attacked the giant tree. However, the next scene caused everyone to be shocked once again. A terrifying black light spread out from the giant tree, as if it was a barrier, blocking everyone's attacks. Very quickly, everyone realized that their attacks, although the tree, did not cause the tree's attack. It was much weaker than what they had expected. How can this be? She did not expect that this would be a fierce of the tree Hongzhuang, who knew that the trees to the tree to the tree trees to stuzes. To the baon was, in fact, it the tree to uses to uses to the tree. This, of the trees to the tree. This giant tree. Of this to be to survive. In the past, there must have been other groups of cultivators who encountered this giant tree, but they were unable to deal with it. This situation is very normal, so everyone should be mentally prepared. Chapter 23-28. Since this was a huge problem that no one had been able to solve for so many years, if there was a treasure here, it would definitely be extremely precious. Riches and honor were found in the midst of danger. This was a popular saying in the cultivation world. If one wanted to obtain a treasure, it was impossible to not put in a lot of effort. Martial techniques were continuously used, and the vines of the giant tree danced even more fiercely. In a short period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others seemed to have been trapped in a cage made of vines. The vines were everywhere, attacking Bailey Hongzhuang and the others with all their might. It was obvious that the actions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had truly angered the vines. The contracted beasts also began to protect their masters, blocking the attacks of the vines so that their masters could have more time to use their martial technique. Because the number of vines was simply too terrifying, When Xiao He and Xiao Bai saw this scene, their figures instantly enlarged several times in front of everyone's shocked eyes, turning into two demonic beasts the size of the giant tree. Even though the two furballs, one black and one white, were enlarged several times, they still had an indescribable naivety. However, from the spiritual energy in their eyes and their nimble movements, everyone could tell that these two furballs were extremely powerful. When Long Xianjing and the others saw the furballs that had suddenly enlarged to such an extent, their faces all revealed looks of disbelief. What the hell? What kind of contracted beasts are these? They can actually change their size like that? Last night, when Xiao He and Xiao Bai turned into human size, it was already shocking enough. Who would have thought that Xiao He and Xiao Bai were not at their limit? They could actually enlarge to such an extent. This was simply too shocking. I've never heard of contracted beasts like this before. This time, I've really learned something new. Young Palace Mistress, contracted beasts are truly mystical. I can't even recognize a single one of these three contracted beasts. Ever since they saw the powerful abilities of Bailey Hongzhuang's three contracted beasts, everyone was filled with curiosity towards these three contracted beasts. However, after a long private discussion, they still could not come to a conclusion. This made everyone feel somewhat defeated. It was normal that they couldn't compare to the young palace master, but they couldn't even tell what kind of monster beast the young palace master had contracted was. This was too much of a blow to them. At this moment, everyone looked at the gigantic figures of Xiao He and Xiao Bai, and then looked at the similarly gigantic tree opposite them. They suddenly realized that there were still many things in this world that they did not know. As Xiao He and Xiao Bai enlarged their bodies, many vines were attracted to them. As a result, the number of vines attacking Bailey Hongzhuang and the others decreased significantly. Everyone was overjoyed when they saw Xiao He and Xiao Bai attracting so many tree vines. In an instant, everyone's attacks became even more violent. The vines were blown apart one by one, and blood immediately gushed out. The smell of blood in the air grew stronger. The tree vines seemed to have sensed Xiao He and Xiao Bai's influence in this battle. They immediately focused all their attacks on Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Only by getting rid of Xiao He and Xiao Bai would the giant tree have a chance of defeating Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. As all the tree vines swarmed towards them, Xiao He and Xiao Bai were quickly entangled by the tree vines. Chapter 23-29. The vines quickly tightened, intending to use this method to kill Xiao He and Xiao Bai. When the crowd saw this, they immediately went to rescue Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Everyone knew that once they were bound by the vines, they would be killed instantly. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice rang out, "Everyone, use this opportunity to attack the giant tree with all your might." At this moment, all of the giant tree's vines were attacking Xiao He and Xiao Bai, so it was unable to restrain them. They could use this opportunity to attack the giant tree furiously. If they missed this opportunity, it would be even more difficult to deal with the giant tree later on. When they heard this, although everyone wanted to save Xiao He and Xiao Bai, they knew that Bailey Hongzhuang must have her reasons for saying this. Instantly, everyone turned their attention to the giant tree. Now that the giant tree's defense was the weakest, they might be able to use this opportunity to break through the giant tree's defense. While the other cultivators were attacking the giant tree, Bailey Hongzhuang gave Bai Shi a look. Bai Shi immediately understood and immediately appeared beside Xiao He and Xiao Bai. The giant tree was obviously not as smart as the humans. It did not remember that Xiao He and Xiao Bai had the ability to change their size. Xiao He and Xiao Bai also knew that what they needed to do now was to attract the vine's combat power. Hence, even though they were bound by the vines like dumplings, they were not in a hurry to escape. After all, they could quickly shrink when the vines were trying to kill them. Boom! Boom! Ripples appeared on the black barrier, blocking all the attacks. However, during the process of the attacks, everyone realized that the black barrier was not invincible. As their attacks became more and more intense, The ripples on the black barrier became deeper and deeper. Faintly, a crack appeared. Seeing this, the crowd was delighted. As long as the giant tree's defense could be broken, there was hope for them. Everyone, do your best. We need to destroy this tree's defense as soon as possible. Long Xianjing shouted. The other cultivators naturally noticed this as well. They were overjoyed and their attacks became even fiercer. Xiao He and Xiao Bai quickly shrunk after they could no longer withstand the vines. White Lion had been paying attention to Xiao He and Xiao Bai's movements. When it saw Xiao He and Xiao Bai shrink, it quickly attacked the vines from the outside. She waved her sharp claws rapidly and dug out a hole in a short period of time. Xiao He and Xiao Bai immediately jumped out. After jumping out, Xiao He and Xiao Bai enlarged their bodies again and attacked the tree vines. Right now, they were only playing the role of harassing the tree vines. As long as the tree vines could not affect the crowd too much, it would be enough. When the giant tree saw that Xiao He and Xiao Bai had escaped from the vine cage, it was furious. It had failed to kill the two of them. If it tried again, its defense would not be able to last for long. Thinking of this, the giant tree could not be bothered with Xiao He and Xiao Bai. It immediately attacked the other cultivators. Xiao He and Xiao Bai had already seen through the giant tree's thoughts. They would not let it leave so easily. They stretched out their hands and tightly bound the tree vines. Chapter 23:30. Bailey Hongzhuang unleashed her martial arts techniques to attack the black barrier. As they unleashed their attacks, Bailey Hongzhuang became more and more astonished. The cultivators in their team were all very powerful, but under their continuous attacks, only a few cracks appeared on the black barrier. Just from this point alone, one could see how powerful the tree vines were. It was no wonder that the tree vines had existed here for so many years without anyone being able to get rid of them. Its defensive power was just too terrifying. If not for Xiao He and Xiao Bai restraining it, it would have been extremely difficult for them to kill the giant tree. Perhaps, the annihilation of some of the teams in the past had something to do with the giant tree. The giant tree's defensive power is just too shocking. Yan Aoshuang was shocked when she saw that the giant tree was still unscathed even after they had unleashed so many attacks and the surroundings had been razed to the ground. This level of defensive power was simply comparable to the sect-protecting formation of a small sect. Yes, its defensive power is simply incredible. It's like an overlord in this forest. Even a blue realm demon beast would probably die in its hands. The abilities displayed by the giant tree had completely exceeded the scope of everyone's imagination. It was basically a tree demon and could not be judged by common sense. Just as everyone was sighing in amazement, countless tree vines suddenly attacked them. When they saw this, everyone could not help but look at Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Previously, they had only been able to focus on attacking the tree vines because Xiao He and Xiao Bai were restraining it. They did not expect the tree vines to entangle them again. When they saw this, everyone realized that the tree vines had avoided Xiao He and Xiao Bai after they had failed to attack Xiao He and Xiao Bai. No matter where Xiao He and Xiao Bai appeared, the tree vines would quickly retract and avoid any entanglement with Xiao He and Xiao Bai. The reaction speed of the tree vines was extremely fast, and Xiao He and Xiao Bai's efforts were in vain as they deliberately avoided the tree vines. For a time, everyone once again fell into the entanglement of the tree vines, complaining incessantly. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. This can't go on. Damn it. This giant tree is getting smarter and smarter. We are bound by these vines and can't use any martial skills. Pei Yifan couldn't help but curse out loud. These vines were like annoying flies, causing him to be unable to move at all. The other cultivators were also restrained by the tree vines and were unable to use their martial arts technique. Then, the crowd realized that the giant tree had a smug smile on its face. It was obviously mocking Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Master, this can't go on. White Lion's eyes were gloomy. Their battle not only consumed their essence energy, It also consumed their physical strength. However, the power of the giant tree seemed to be inexhaustible. No matter how they bombarded it, the giant tree was not affected at all. If this continued, they would be the ones at a disadvantage. White Lion, Xiao He, Xiao Bai, protect me from the side. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly retreated. When she was a certain distance away from the tree vines, she sat down on the ground. A simple yet exquisite zither appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's hand. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang take out the nine-tailed zither, the three beasts were stunned. Then, they smiled excitedly. Chapter 23:31. Killing with sound was a skill that Bailey Hongzhuang had learned in the past. However, she did not use it often. Killing with sound was a group attack skill with a wide area of effect. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang usually attacked directly. However, in this situation, with so many tree vines, it was a good idea to use this skill. Clang, a crisp sound poured out from the nine-tailed zither, and Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly hooked up into a smile. The sound quality of the nine-tailed zither was excellent, and the effect was also excellent. When the crowd saw Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly sitting at the back and playing the zither, they were confused. They did not understand why Bailey Hongzhuang was playing the zither at this moment. The sound of the zither continued to flow from Bailey Hongzhuang's fingers. A song of high mountains and flowing water was vividly interpreted by her. The crowd was intoxicated by the beautiful sound of the zither. They did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang was not only strong, but also good at the zither. However, now was not the time to show off her zither skills. What is young palace master doing? Pei Yifan was confused. As a cultivator, he had little contact with the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Now that the tree demon was so powerful, even if they joined forces, it would not be easy to deal with it. However, the young palace master was playing the zither for no reason. It was too strange. Long Xianjing and Yan Aoshuang were also looking at Bailey Hongzhuang. A possibility appeared in their hearts. Long Xianjing and Yan Aoshuang could not help but look at each other. Although they had not known the young palace master for long, they were sure that the young palace master was not someone who would do useless things. Aoshuang, I have heard of a group attack skill that uses the sound of the zither as a carrier. However, there are very few people who know this skill. Yan Aoshuang nodded. If we are not wrong, the young palace master is the one who has mastered this skill. Just as everyone was feeling puzzled, Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music became increasingly sharp. Essence energy was poured into the zither music, and it was as if it had materialized and attacked the tree vines. Some of the cultivators still hadn't figured out what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing when they saw the vines that had surrounded them and annoyed them to no end suddenly snap apart with a loud sound. It was as if there was an invisible sharp weapon that directly cut off the tree vines. Hundreds of vines broke apart with a loud bang. The cut was extremely smooth, and everyone regained their freedom in an instant. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang with eyes full of horror. Previously, they had fought with the tree vines for a long time and only managed to cut off 100 of them. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang had directly cut off the tree demon's claws and fangs with just a zither note. This was too shocking. As expected of the young palace master, this strength is really amazing. This time, I really admire the young palace master. This strength is really too heaven-defying. Everyone could not help but sigh. Originally, when they knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had reached the first level of the Blue Realm, they were already very impressed by Bailey Hongzhuang. However, now it seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang's combat power had completely exceeded the normal first level of the Blue Realm. With the terrifying combat power of the three contracted beasts and the endless stream of trump cards, even if they joined forces, they might not be Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent. Chapter 23:32. The tree demon had been running amok in this forest for so many years. No matter if it was a demonic beast or a cultivator, none of them had been able to injure it to this extent. However, it still did not know what had happened that caused so many of its vines to be cut off. One had to know that it had sucked the blood of countless demonic beasts in order to cultivate so many vines. Who would have thought that all of its efforts would be for naught? Bailey Hongzhuang played the high mountain flowing water. Ever since she had learned this zither technique, her master had taught her that no matter what kind of song it was, it would contain a powerful and domineering attack. A fierce song would naturally be filled with killing intent. However, a gentle song would make it easy for people to let down their guard. Occasionally, a killing move would be able to achieve unexpected result. If she had played the fierce song from the start, the tree demon would have already turned its attention to her. When everyone saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had helped them to solve such a huge obstacle, their hearts were filled with joy. Leave these vines to me. You guys continue to deal with the black barrier. Bailey Hongzhuang's cold and sweet voice slowly rang out. Long Xianjing looked at the three beasts beside Bailey Hongzhuang and knew that these three beasts would definitely be able to protect Bailey Hongzhuang. Immediately, everyone's attention turned back to the black barrier. Only by breaking this black barrier would they have a chance to kill the tree demon. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang had already attracted all of the tree demon's aggro. Hence, the tree demon did not care about Long Xianjing and the rest. It only wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. This hateful woman and her beasts had ruined its many years of hard work. Seeing that the tree demon had turned all of its attention to her, Bailey Hongzhuang was not worried at all. Instead, she was happy. This was the result that she wanted to see. The zither music continued, crisp and pleasant to the ears. Elemental energy flowed along the zither music, and the attacks of the vines were all blocked by Bailey Hongzhuang. The three beasts stood guard beside Bailey Hongzhuang in case of an emergency. However, based on the strength that Bailey Hongzhuang had displayed, there was no need for them to make a move. That was because Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music was enough to stop an army of thousands of men and horses. Pung pung pung. The vines exploded one after another, turning into a bloody mist in midair. The smell of blood became thicker and thicker. Bailey Hongzhuang was not stained by a single speck of blood. The two formed a stark contrast. As the sound of Bailey Hongzhuang's zither became more and more agitated, the effect of the attack also became more and more astonishing. In a short time, the tree demon had already suffered a big loss in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang. It did not dare to attack Bailey Hongzhuang anymore because Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music had formed a terrifying barrier of killing intent. As long as it got close to Bailey Hongzhuang, all of the vines would turn into nothingness. The tree demon had also realized that whether it was Bailey Hongzhuang or her three beasts, they were not easy to deal with. Compared to them, the other cultivators were the key to breaking through. The tree demon no longer attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. However, Bailey Hongzhuang would not let the tree demon go. This tree demon had already caused them a lot of trouble. Speaking of which, it had only itself to blame for falling into this situation. If it was not for the tree demon's sneak attack last night, they would not have even noticed the existence of the tree demon. Chapter 23:33. Under the attacks of Long Xianjing and the others, the cracks on the black barrier were getting bigger and bigger. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the black barrier was completely destroyed. When everyone felt the zither music attacking the black barrier, they finally came back to their senses. When they saw what was happening, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. The dense vines that were originally wrapped around the tree demon's body had unknowingly turned into nothingness. Everyone could only see countless cuts and blood dripping out. The tree demon was no longer as complacent as before. On the contrary, its humanoid face was extremely ugly, and its arrogant aura had completely dissipated. The tree demon looked at everyone with fear. It had never suffered such a serious injury before, and almost all of its skills were gone. Once this black barrier was broken, then his life would be in danger. When everyone saw the change in the tree demon's expression, a smile gradually appeared on their faces. Victory was in sight. The tree demon had existed in this forest for so many years and had never been defeated. Now that they could defeat it, it was something to be happy about. Gotcha! A crisp cracking sound was heard. The black barrier finally couldn't take the pressure and dissipated under everyone's attacks. In the next moment, everyone's attacks landed on the tree demon's body. The tree demon's defense was this powerful black barrier. Now that the black barrier was gone, it naturally had no power to resist everyone's attacks. Bang! Everyone only heard a loud explosion, and the tree demon was turned into a cloud of blood mist by the attack, spraying all over the ground. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but exclaim. They were extremely happy. This tree demon is really powerful. It took us so long to defeat it. Young Palace Master, you're really amazing. Your zither skills are amazing. Pei Yifan gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up. Now it seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't use her true strength when she fought against Chewing Fei. If Bailey Hongzhuang was serious, Chewing Fei wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from her. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Everyone has worked hard. Everyone wiped the sweat off their foreheads. The tree demon's combat strength had reached the blue realm. It wasn't easy to defeat it. Bailey Hongzhuang put away the nine-tailed zither and slowly walked towards the tree demon's original position. They spent so much effort to defeat the tree demon. They didn't know if there were any treasures behind the tree demon. Long Xianjing and the others also walked beside Bailey Hongzhuang. They spent so much effort to defeat the tree demon because they wanted to know if there were any treasures behind the tree demon. If there weren't any treasures, then their efforts would have been in vain. However, after the tree demon turned into a bloody mist, the situation in front of him became clear. There was no treasure at all. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces couldn't help but reveal chews. After spending so much effort, I actually didn't get anything. What a waste of effort. I didn't expect it to be just a tree demon. Could it be that it wasn't deliberately left behind by the major factions? Chapter 2334. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the blood on the ground in front of her and frowned slightly. According to her experience as the head of an aristocratic family in her previous life, there must be a deeper meaning to this arrangement. There should be something behind it. Could it be that the tests in the Battle of Zhuolu were all so difficult? If so, then the various factions must have put in a lot of effort to let the cultivators gain experience. This was illogical. Bailey Hongzhuang only thought that this was illogical. If even dealing with this kind of tree demon was nothing, then it would be too difficult to obtain the treasures in the Battle of Zhuolu. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang continued to walk forward until she reached the place where the tree demon had been. The ground was covered with sticky blood, and walking in gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. When everyone saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was still stubbornly walking to the place where the tree demon had been, they couldn't help but feel helpless. It seemed that the young palace master found it even harder to believe this fact. However, the scene that happened next made everyone's eyes widen. Because Bailey Hongzhuang had disappeared into thin air before everyone's eyes. Seeing this scene, Li Yangbing couldn't help but rub his eyes, wondering if he had seen wrongly. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was indeed not in front of him. What's going on? Why did the young palace master disappear? Li Yangbing said in shock. Long Xianjing looked at the place where Bailey Hongzhuang had disappeared and frowned. There must be a problem here. Hearing Long Xuanjing's words, everyone looked at each other and then picked up their weapons and approached the place where Bailey Hongzhuang had gone. After Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the place where the tree demon had been, she found that she had walked into a world of ice and her body slid down uncontrollably. During this process, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that this was a passage made of ice. It was smooth and solid like a slide. That was why she was able to slide down from the top. The three beasts were also standing behind Bailey Hongzhuang. At first, they exclaimed in surprise, but when they saw the crystal-clear world of ice in front of them, their eyes lit up. The slide was very long. Bailey Hongzhuang slid all the way to the bottom before standing up. The three beasts followed closely behind. However, the three of them liked to fight with each other, so when the three of them crashed together, they immediately felt dizzy. Xiao Hei scratched her head in dissatisfaction and jumped onto Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. "Master, what is this place? It looked really magical." Xiao Hei's eyes were filled with curiosity. She didn't expect that there would be such a magical place where the tree demon had been. It was really amazing. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at everything in front of her and saw that the surrounding mountains were all made of ice. They were like ice sculptures, beautiful and spectacular. The cold air continued to enter her body. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but take out a winter coat from her Qianquan bag and put it on. The ice here is not simple. Bailey Hongzhuang muttered to herself. Logically speaking, with her current strength, she should be able to withstand the cold. However, facing this ice, her elemental energy was unable to stop the cold air from corroding her body. It could be seen how powerful it was. Just when Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking, a few more exclamations came from the slide above. Chapter 23:35. With a series of exclamations, Long Xianjing and the others appeared behind Bailey Hongzhuang. When everyone saw what was in front of them, they were completely dumbfounded. The size of this place was completely beyond their expectations. Heavens, what is this place? Yan Aoshuang's face was filled with disbelief. Who would have thought that there was such a world behind the tree demon? Long Xianjing and the others also looked around in surprise. If not for Bailey Hongzhuang taking the initiative to come here, they would have missed this place. Fortunately, young Palace Master found this place. Otherwise, we would have fought for nothing. Li Yangbing couldn't help but sigh. If not for Bailey Hongzhuang wanting to go over to take a look, they would not have thought that this place was connected to such a world. Obviously, this was a small world created by the various large factions. It was impossible for such a big place to not have any treasures. Everyone nodded. In fact, they were all prepared to leave. Speaking of which, the young palace master's reaction was much sharper than theirs. There should be treasures here. Everyone, let's look around. Long Xianjing looked around. There were all kinds of treasures in the Battle of Zhuolu. There was no need to think to know that there must be treasures in this place. Following Long Xuanjing's words, everyone started to look around. The reason why everyone was so desperate to obtain a spot in the Battle of Zhuolu was because they wanted to become famous under the heavens. On the other hand, they wanted to obtain more cultivation resources. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around. Other than ice, there was only ice. She could see through it at a glance. She really couldn't find anything special. "Master, the treasure here can't be this ice, right?" Baisher looked around and found that there was nothing here. He couldn't help but sigh. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. "It shouldn't be. The ice here is so special, but there are so many of them. It shouldn't be a treasure." According to Bailey Hongzhuang's past experience, there might be other treasures in this ice. It was just that they hadn't found them yet. Little black, little white, little white, little white, look carefully. There might be something in the ice that looks the same as ice, but is not the same kind of thing. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the three beasts nodded their heads. Their master was much more experienced than them in this aspect. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes flashed with the light of wisdom as she carefully observed her surroundings. The tree demon had never been killed before, and no one had ever come to this world of ice before. Since that was the case, the treasures inside must still be there. For a time, the man and the three beasts worked hard to search. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure leapt up, using shifting form's shadow transposition, directly climbing up the ice mountain. As Bailey Hongzhuang stood at the highest point, she discovered that there was something moving at the highest point. Moving? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes narrowed. In this frozen state there was something that could move. Even though its movements were extremely slow, she could still see a slight change. It should be this. Chapter 23:36. Master, you found something? The three beasties saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had suddenly stopped moving, and they all came to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, wanting to know what Bailey Hongzhuang had found. When the three beasties saw what Bailey Hongzhuang had seen, their eyes widened. In their line of sight, a tiny flame was swaying in the ice, so tiny that it was almost invisible. There's actually a flame in the ice, isn't that too unbelievable? Xiao He looked at this scene in disbelief, but from the slight swaying, she could still confirm that it was a flame. This ice is so powerful, but this flame is still able to exist here. It seems that this flame is very powerful. Although Xiao He had never seen this kind of transparent flame, but fire and ice were existences that countered each other. To be able to survive in this ice world, and to be such a small flame, it was definitely not simple. Bailey Hongzhuang carefully looked at this flame. If her guess was right, the quality of this flame was probably a few grades higher than ordinary flames. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was studying, Long Xianjing and the rest came to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, wanting to know what Bailey Hongzhuang had found. After everyone saw the flame clearly, everyone's mouth was wide open. This should be the ice-cold flame, right? Long Xianjing carefully looked at the small flame in front of him, and his expression was filled with surprise and disbelief. Ice-cold flame? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows raised slightly. There were some strange flames in this world, but this ice-cold flame, she had never heard of it. It was probably a flame that was born later on. Long Xianjing nodded, seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not know much about this ice-cold flame. He started to explain. The ice-cold flame is a special flame that was born between heaven and earth. Its temperature is ice-cold, and is usually born in ice mountains, but the temperature it burns is extremely high, and can burn everything. It is because these two completely special characteristics are concentrated in it, so the ice-cold flame is often called by people. However, the ice-cold flame's survival in this world is extremely small. I did not expect it to appear here. Long Xianjing could not help but exclaim, this kind of treasure was completely out of their expectations. I did not expect the Battle of Zhuolu to be so generous, even having such a treasure. Yan Ao Shuang's usually calm face also revealed a look of surprise. This kind of treasure, many powers do not have. I wonder which power. This is too generous. If the successor of this force could absorb this icy cold fire, his strength would increase by another level. This icy cold fire had many wonderful uses. Unexpectedly, it was left behind in the Battle of Zhuolu. At this moment, Li Yangbing's surprised voice suddenly sounded. Look, there is a ices. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone looked towards the direction Li Yangbing was pointing at. Sure enough, there really was a frost-sacred lotus there. A sparkling and translucent lotus flower was growing on top of the ice, but because it was in a corner, it was easy to overlook it. It really is the frost-sacred lotus. The sacred frost lotus was a type of medicinal treasure that could increase a cultivator's cultivation and heal injuries. It could be said to be a sacred healing item. Chapter 23:37. In the Shengxian continent, the frozen sacred lotus had always been a priceless treasure. Because such a treasure could save one's life at any time, no matter the price, it was not as important as one's life. Therefore, the frozen sacred lotus had always been priceless. Even at auctions it was rarely seen. After everyone saw the frozen sacred lotus, their gazes changed. I didn't expect that there would be a frozen sacred lotus here. Everyone's gaze couldn't help but look back and forth between the mysterious ice-cold flame and the frozen sacred lotus. Both of them were extremely precious treasures, but the mysterious ice-cold flame was obviously more valuable. However, none of them had expected that there would be two treasures here. It seemed that this Battle of Zhuolu was indeed worthy of its reputation. Even if they couldn't become famous through this Battle of Zhuolu, just these treasures were enough to raise their strength by another level. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly understood the crux of the matter. Although the frozen sacred lotus was precious, It wasn't like some big powers didn't have it. After all, even without the frozen sacred lotus, there were still some pills that could bring people back to life. However, this mysterious ice-cold flame was different. If a human cultivator absorbed this mysterious ice-cold flame, then their strength would increase greatly, and they would have one more martial arts technique. The benefits were too great. A treasure of this level would be extremely precious even in a sect or an aristocratic family. Looking at the environment of the ice world in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang was almost certain that there was only one sacred ice lotus here. It was just that this tree demon was too powerful. It had existed in this battle of Zhuolu for so many years, and no team had been able to defeat it. As time passed, the environment here actually gave birth to the mysterious ice-cold flame. Only this reason could explain why there were two treasures here. Most likely, even the people from the various big powers didn't know that a mysterious ice-cold flame would be born here. If they knew, they would be heartbroken. Let's smash this mysterious ice-cold flame out of the ice first. Long Xianjing looked around. Obviously, there were only these two treasures in this frozen world. Since they had already found it, then there was no need to waste time. It should be known that the ice-cold fire was in the ice mountain. The ice was extremely thick, and it would take a certain amount of time to get it out. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said, "Indeed, let's not waste any more time." For a time, 5 cultivators started to chisel the ice while the other 5 went to pluck the frost Saint Lotus. After a while, everyone successfully took out the ice-cold fire from the ice. "Young Palace Master, you can absorb this ice-cold fire." Long Xianjing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. As the young palace mistress of Limitless Palace, she was the one who discovered this treasure first. It was only right for her to absorb it. The other disciples also nodded in agreement. If not for Bailey Hongzhuang discovering the existence of this icy world, they would have completely missed it. The eyes of the 3 beasts were also filled with excitement. If Master could form a contract with this profound ice fire, then he would have another method to deal with Lan Qingyan. However, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. Chapter 23:38. As Ling Xiu, Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain amount of experience in grasping people's hearts. Now, all the cultivators in the team were convinced by her. Firstly, it was because of her identity as the young palace master. Secondly, it was because of the strength that she displayed. Perhaps Long Xianjing really thought so. But when Long Xianjing said those words, even if the other cultivators were a little unwilling, they couldn't deny it. They could only follow along. However, after this slight gap appeared, the gap behind would become bigger and bigger. It wouldn't be easy to mend it and become united wholeheartedly. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone was slightly stunned. This kind of attitude was obviously out of everyone's expectations. The profound ice fire, this kind of special flame, has its own intelligence. When it's being absorbed, it will also look for its fated owner. Many times, not everyone who finds the profound ice fire can successfully absorb it. Since we found the profound ice fire together, then we are all fated people. Why don't everyone use a bit of spiritual power to test it out? Whoever the profound ice fire chooses in the end will be the one. How about it? Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into a faint smile. The profound ice fire was indeed a very precious treasure. But as the young palace master of Limitless Palace, her heart was more important. As long as they could safely return to Limitless Palace this time, then these people in the team would definitely become the mainstay of Limitless Palace in the future, or even become the future elders. No matter who obtains the profound ice fire this time, everyone has to accept this result peacefully. There are many treasures in the Battle of Zhuolu. This is only the first treasure that we found. Who knows, there might be even more treasures in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was gentle. At this kind of time, if the distribution wasn't fair, everyone would have a knot in their heart. After everyone heard Bailey Hongzhuang's fair and just words, how could they have any objections? If they couldn't attract the profound ice fire, then it was because their skills weren't as good as others. They couldn't be chosen by the profound ice fire. How could they blame the person who got it? In a moment, everyone's impression of Bailey Hongzhuang deepened. Bailey Hongzhuang treated them the same as she treated them. If it was another team leader, they might not be able to do what Bailey Hongzhuang did. Among all the teams, the sex team might be better. The successor would pay more attention to the opinions of some disciples. As for the cultivation aristocratic families, all of their precious treasures belonged to the next family head. Whatever the next family head was willing to give to the other disciples, it was a kind of reward. After Bailey Hongzhuang saw that no one had any objections, she separated a wisp of spiritual power with everyone to touch the profound ice fire. In her previous life, she also knew that there were some special heavenly treasures in this world. They were nurtured by the mysterious power of nature, but she didn't have the luck to encounter them. Since she encountered, she wanted to absorb of it. As her spiritual power approached the profound ice fire, Bailey Hongzhuang felt the strong vitality of the profound ice fire. This kind of vitality was different from the profound ice fire's crumbling appearance. This proved that the profound ice fire looked like this. In fact, it was very strong. Chapter 23:39. The three beasts and the other cultivators' contracted beasts were all curiously sizing up the crowd. No one would know the result until the very end. This kind of thing did not completely depend on one's ability. It depended on who was more fated with the ice-cold fire. Xiao Bai sure, do you think Master will succeed? Xiao He said slowly. This ice-cold fire looks like a treasure. It's hard to say. But with Master's ability, I think it shouldn't be a problem. Xiao Bai said after some thought. Master was not an ordinary person. Along the way, Master had created many miracles. What do you mean by shouldn't be a problem? Bai Shi frowned unhappily. It definitely won't be a problem. Bai Shi believed in Bailey Hongzhuang's ability the most. He was different from Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Xiao He and Xiao Bai had transmigrated together with Bailey Hongzhuang. They had seen many things and did not comment on many things. Bai Shi had been following Bailey Hongzhuang ever since he opened his eyes. Along the way, Bai Shi had a blind admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang. His master was invincible. No one could compare to Master. Bai Shi would not be nice to anyone who doubted his master. Xiao He and Xiao Bai shrunk their necks when they saw Bai Shi's expression. It was not that they did not believe in Master's ability. It was just that this kind of luck did not completely depend on one's ability. As everyone's mental strength came into contact with the ice-cold fire became even more violent. It did not expect so many people to surround it. Obviously, after being surrounded like this, there was almost no chance for it to escape. However, flames were wild and untamed. They would not be tamed so easily. The ice-cold fire quickly began to burn, intending to use this method to stop everyone from absorbing it. After the ice-cold fire struggled wildly, the flame would burn their mental strength if they were not careful. Under such a situation, some cultivators could not help but withdraw from the competition. It was a very uncomfortable feeling to have one's mental strength burned by the flame. One after another, the cultivators withdrew. However, the few cultivators who were at the front of the pack continued to persevere. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If he didn't experience a period of suffering and pain, how could he absorb the ice-cold fire? In order to cultivate to this stage, everyone had experienced many difficulties and obstacles. Most of the time, they had to grit their teeth and persevere to achieve success. If he gave up, he would have nothing left. The ice-cold fire struggled crazily. However, it was not an adult ice-cold fire. It was just born not long ago. After struggling for a while, the ice-cold fire also lost its strength, but these people's spiritual power was still trying to bind it. The ice fire understood that this time, it really couldn't escape. However, it still had a choice. Thinking of this, The icy cold fire directly approached a wisp of mental strength that was slightly gentler. A moment later, Bailey Hongzhuang, Long Xianjing and the others opened their eyes at the same time. The final result was out. A group of contract beasts and the cultivators who withdrew from the competition all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in confusion. They did not know who had succeeded in the end. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice rang. I need to go into seclusion to refine for a while. Can everyone rest here for a while? Chapter 2340. Young Palace Master, you can go ahead and refine it. We will cultivate here. Long Xianjing laughed. Although the profound ice fire chose Bailey Hongzhuang in the end, everyone was convinced. Because they all had a chance to work hard. Yes, young Palace Master, you can refine it first. Everyone nodded, their faces were full of support. However, at this moment, everyone's support came from the bottom of their hearts. Bailey Hongzhuang's previous actions had convinced them. No matter who in the team obtained the profound ice fire, they would need some time to refine it. What was the point of waiting here for a while? Thank you. Bailey Hongzhuang cupped her fists and smiled. Then, she walked to the side and sat cross-legged. She had just absorbed the profound ice fire, but the profound ice fire was still not obedient. It was burning in her body and destroying her body. Therefore, she needed to refine the profound ice fire as soon as possible and merge with it. Then, this problem would not occur again. As Bailey Hongzhuang began to refine the profound ice fire, everyone found a place to sit down and cultivate. This place was extremely cold. Even though everyone was wearing clothes to resist the cold, there was still cold air invading their bodies. However, staying here, they did not need to worry about people or demonic beasts' sneak attacks. At least, before they went out, this place was extremely safe. After cultivating for a while, everyone was surprised to find that cultivating here had unexpectedly good results. The ice group here has built an ice room environment. Cultivating here can actually increase everyone's strength. After pondering for a moment, Long Xianjing understood the reason behind it and immediately explained it to everyone. The ice here was not ordinary ice. It was extremely precious. It was a pity that this place could not be taken away. Otherwise, cultivating here would be beneficial to everyone's strength. After discovering this point, all the cultivators began to cultivate seriously. The three beasts guarded beside Bailey Hongzhuang. They did not know how long it would take for their master to refine the profound ice fire. However, the environment here was not bad, so they were not in a hurry to leave. When Bailey Hongzhuang stopped cultivating, it was already 7 days later. In these 7 days, everyone witnessed Bailey Hongzhuang's breakthrough and improvement. The profound ice fire was a treasure. Once it was used by a cultivator, it would increase the cultivator's strength. At Bailey Hongzhuang's level, it would take a long time to increase one level. However, after absorbing the profound ice fire, her strength increased directly. It was really enviable. The moment Bailey Hongzhuang opened her eyes, a nearly transparent flame appeared in her eyes, and in a short moment, it had already dissipated. Looking at everyone who was cultivating, Bailey Hongzhuang said, "Everyone has waited for me for so long. We can set off now." After breaking through, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that her spirit was extremely good. The sparkling luster on her face was even more beautiful. Seeing this, Long Xianjing and the others also stood up. "Congratulations, young Palace Master." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "It's all thanks to everyone. Young Palace Master, how do we deal with this cold ice sacred lotus?" Chapter 2341. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at everyone and said, "This sacred ice lotus is extremely effective. If you only need to use it to save your life, you only need one petal. It's not just the petal, the lotus seed has the same effect. If you don't mind, you can each take a portion. If you don't think that's appropriate, we can keep it for now and distribute it when we find other treasures in the future." Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. The sacred ice lotus was easier to distribute than other treasures. Moreover, treasures like this were not something that could be found anywhere. This tree demon was so difficult to deal with, and only this sacred ice lotus was here. It would not be easy to find treasures of this level in other places. So, according to Bailey Hongzhuang's idea, it was better for everyone to distribute it like this. The others naturally thought of this and decided to distribute it together. If they were in danger, they could use it to save their lives. If they missed it today, it would not be easy to find another treasure like this in the future. Very quickly, everyone had divided the sacred ice lotus equally. In the end, there was only one lotus seed left. Everyone gave it to Bailey Hongzhuang. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang did not reject it. Having a treasure like this on her was an extra layer of protection. As a cultivator, they often faced dangerous situations. No one knew when they would be in a situation where they couldn't protect their lives. We've been delayed here for quite some time. It's time to move out. Today was already the 8th day of the Battle of Zhuolu, and they were still in the periphery of the Battle of Zhuolu. It seemed that the other teams were much deeper in than them, and they had to catch up. Everyone quickly left the ice world. When they returned to the place where they had killed the tree demon, the blood on the ground had dried up, but there was still a pungent smell. Speaking of which, they had gotten off to a good start in dealing with the tree demon. The group slowly walked into the depths of the forest. In the next few days, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others walked peacefully and did not meet with any danger. This was all because of the tree demon's existence. All the demonic beasts within hundreds of miles had disappeared. It was probably because this place had become a forbidden area that the tree demon had absorbed all the blood it could and was unable to grow. Therefore, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others appear, the tree demon couldn't help but take the initiative to act. However, in the end, he still fell in their hands. The Battle of Zhuolu's forest is really vast. We've been walking for a few days, but I'm afraid we're not even at the center of the forest. Yan Ao Shuang looked around, her expression revealing a bit of a sigh. Yan Ao Shuang, this battlefield is mostly a forest. Don't tell me you're still hoping to build a city for yourself? Li Yangbing chuckled. This kind of environment was the most common in the Shengxian continent. Who said anything about a city? It's just that we've been walking for so many days, and we haven't even met a single team. This is a little boring. Yan Ao Shuang curled her lips and explained. Hearing this, the crowd sighed inwardly. The most important thing for them to participate in the Battle of Zhuolu was to obtain an identity badge. However, until now they had not seen a single team. If this continued, it would not be a good thing. Chapter 23:42. Bailey Hongzhuang furrowed her brows. It was indeed a problem that they hadn't met any other teams. Logically speaking, although the Battle of Zhuolu covered a large area, there were also many teams participating. They should have met some other teams by now. Everyone, don't be impatient. We are gradually approaching the center of the forest. We may meet other teams at any time. Logically speaking, we shouldn't be too far away. Bailey Hongzhuang tried to calm everyone down. Being anxious and impatient wouldn't do them any good. Young Palace Master is right. Let's not be impatient. We should pay more attention to our surroundings. We may be ambushed at any time. Long Xianjing reminded everyone calmly. Before the young Palace Master appeared, he was the one leading the team. Now that the young Palace Master was here, he would naturally do his best to support the young Palace Master. Everyone nodded their heads. They understood that this kind of thing couldn't be rushed. They just couldn't help but complain a little. 2 days later. Master, we are already very far away from the tree demon. Until now, we have not met any other demonic beast. Isn't this too strange? White Lion's eyes flashed with a vigilant light. There was definitely something fishy going on. You think so too? Bailey Hongzhuang furrowed her brows. She had also noticed this point. Even if the tree demon's attack range was very wide, They should have already exceeded the tree demon's territory. However, until now they hadn't met any other demonic beast. It was too peaceful. Master, could it be that we have entered the territory of another terrifying beast? Xiao Hei's face was a little ugly. Only places with powerful demonic beasts would have no other demonic beasts. This was because every commander demonic beast had its own territory. No other demonic beasts were allowed to come close. I'm afraid that's the case. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. It seemed that there were quite a few terrifying demonic beasts in this battle of Zhuolu. Everyone, be careful. We may have entered the territory of another demonic beast. We may meet it at any time. Be prepared to fight at any time. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her voice. The tree demon they encountered last time was already very difficult to deal with. This time, the thing in the middle of the forest would be even more difficult to deal with. Pei Yifan and the others' expressions changed when they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. The same thought had appeared in their minds, but they had never voiced it out. However, it was clear that he could no longer continue to hold this mentality. After walking for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but stop. In front of him was a blur. The trees were blocked by the fog, and the visibility was extremely low. Moreover, this area was extremely wide, and the entire area in front of him was filled with these weapons. Young Palace Master, I'm afraid this is miasma. Long Xuanjing's voice sounded in Bailey Hongzhuang's ears. Miasma would often appear in some swamps in the forest, and everyone was not unfamiliar with this miasma. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and looked at the miasma wisely. It seems that if we want to move forward, we can only pass through this miasma. Otherwise, all our previous efforts will be in vain. Their progress wasn't very fast. If they went back the way they came, they would have to return empty-handed in this battle of Zhuolu. Chapter 23:43. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at everyone's expression and understood that everyone had the same thoughts as her. There was absolutely no possibility of retreat. Let's go in. Bailey Hongzhuang's pitch-black phoenix eyes flashed with a determined light as she took the lead and walked into the miasma. Everyone, be careful of your surroundings. A swamp may appear at any time. Don't go too far away and keep in contact. Xiao Hei and Xiao Bai sat on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders, while Baisher followed beside Bailey Hongzhuang. In the past, Bailey Hongzhuang had also encountered miasma when she was in the Luo Yun mountain range. However, their team was too weak at that time. Now, the team was full of experts, so it was very easy to lead. Because miasma was very easy to appear in the forest, Limitless Palace had already prepared pills for everyone to face the miasma. Everyone had already taken the pills at the first moment, so the miasma could no longer affect them. However, as everyone went deeper and deeper, they found that the miasma was so dense that they could not see the ground 1 meter away from them. This miasma is really too dense, and according to the current situation, the range has already exceeded our expectations. Yan Aoshuang's face was serious. If they lost their direction in this miasma, it would be an extremely terrible thing. In this kind of place, it was not easy to rest at night because the visibility was too low. If they were attacked, everyone's reaction speed would be very slow. Most importantly, in such a strange place, their spiritual power was also affected. Let's make some marks. Only then can we determine the direction. Long Xianjing said slowly. From the moment they walked into the miasma, they could still determine the direction. However, as they went deeper and deeper, it became more and more difficult to determine the direction. Soon, everyone walked along the way and marked the number 1, 2, 3, 4 on the tree to determine the direction. After walking for a while, Li Yangbing suddenly cried out in surprise. "Oh no, we're back to the original position." As soon as she said this, everyone looked at the tree trunk that Li Yangbing was pointing at. Sure enough, there was a 1 written on the tree trunk. It was the mark they left at the beginning. I feel that we've been walking in the same direction. How can we be back to the original position? Pei Yifun's face was full of confusion. He had been carefully sensing along the way and did not notice any change in direction at all. Let's walk again. Bailey Hongzhuang's face sank. Obviously, the current situation was not easy to solve. Hearing this, everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. However, under the current situation, they had no other choice. However, after they had walked for a while, Li Yangbing's awkward and helpless voice rang out again. Young Palace Master, we're back to the original position. Everyone took a closer look and they saw the familiar one-word one. Bailey Hongzhuang was lost in thought, her black and white eyes as bright and clear as the moon. I clearly feel that we have been walking straight. Why are we back to the original position? Faced with this situation, everyone was indescribable is of this. With their hongzis of theirs longs, was that sense of the wood definitely not to be wrong. Chapter 2344. Everyone nodded. If there was only a small deviation every time, it was indeed difficult to find in this miasma. Let's take a break first and think of a solution. Since they had already tried to walk 2 laps and could not find any problem, even if they did not believe it, the result would be the same. This demonic miasma forest was not simple. If they did not think of a way to break it, they would be trapped here. Everyone sat on the ground and formed a circle to guard against any danger that might appear at any time. Along the way, I did not find anything wrong. Moreover, the place where the miasma is always moist. There were footsteps everywhere we walked, but when we walked back again, the footsteps disappeared. It's really strange. Li Yangbing's face was very ugly. He had paid attention to these details before. It was because he did not see any footprints that he felt that they did not go the wrong way. However, he did not expect that he was wrong in the end. Listening to Li Yangbing's words, everyone could not help but be stunned. They did not pay attention to this matter. Chapter 2345. However, there were many types of spirit arrays, and Bailey Hongzhuang had studied them for a period of time in her past life, so she had a certain understanding of them. She had to distinguish which type of spirit array it belonged to before she could come up with a solution. Otherwise, these spirit arrays would often have the effect of punishment. Once she made a mistake in the process of deciphering them, they would be attacked. In such a huge miasma forest, it was impossible for there to not be a single demonic beast. The only explanation was that the spirit array had trapped all the demonic beasts in it, so the demonic beasts could not see them and they could not see the demonic beasts. Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for an hour and everyone looked around, occasionally glancing at Bailey Hongzhuang. Towards this demonic miasma forest, everyone was really confused. Even though everyone had already made preparations before they entered the Battle of Zhuolu, but ever since they entered the Battle of Zhuolu, everything they saw had an indescribable strangeness to it, making them feel extremely helpless. Now, among everyone, only the young palace master had discovered something, and they could only wait here. Finally, Bailey Hongzhuang kept her pen and paper, and her ink-black eyes flashed with a bright light. Young palace master, did you discover something? Everyone saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had stopped pondering, and they all began to ask her. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head slightly and said, "If I'm not wrong, we should be trapped in an array." Array? Everyone could not help but exclaim. This array was something that they rarely came into contact with. Although they had heard of it before, they did not understand it at all. No one would have thought that there would be an array in the Battle of Zhuolu. If that was the case, wouldn't they be trapped here? Immediately, everyone's heart sank. At this moment, outside the Battle of Zhuolu, there were also a few sect elders discussing the situation inside the Battle of Zhuolu. I wonder which team is unlucky this year to be randomly sent to the path of the tree demons. That path was designed to be too difficult. After so many years of the Battle of Zhuolu, no disciple has ever been able to walk from that path to the center of the Battle of Zhuolu. Every time, they would be trapped in the formation for 3 months before being brought back by us. There's nothing we can do about it. Since it was set up in the first place, although everyone has complained about it over the years, they have tacitly agreed to its existence. Luck was also a part of strength. Whichever team is unlucky enough to encounter it, it's their own bad luck. The leaders of each faction hoped that their own faction would not be so unlucky as to walk on that path. Otherwise, they would really be at the bottom of the list. In the past, the teams that had been teleported to that location had always been last place in the Battle of Zhuolu. Although everyone knew the reason behind this, it was still hard for anyone to accept the title of last place. Most importantly, the cultivators couldn't be blamed for this, because they couldn't be blamed either. Linfeng, which team do you think will walk the most difficult path this year? Nangong Wu stood beside Yu Linfeng. A cool breeze blew, and her fine black hair danced in the wind. Their fine black hair tangled together under the cool breeze. Yu Linfeng shook his head. No one can say for certain things like this. We can only leave it to fate. I only hope that it won't be our team. Otherwise, it would be terrible. Chapter 2346. If Nangong Wu knew that Limitless Palace's team was the unfortunate ones who walked into this path, she would definitely vomit blood. This was the most unlucky situation. Even if there were teams that fell into this trap every year, Limitless Palace had only participated in the Battle of Zhuolu for a few years. However, this time, the young palace master was the one leading the team. This kind of problem was simply too depressing. Compared to the various guesses of the outside world, Bailey Hongzhuang and her team were completely oblivious. They only thought that the difficulty of the Battle of Zhuolu was the same as theirs. They were still lamenting that the difficulty of the Battle of Zhuolu was not small. If Limitless Palace's disciples knew that the real situation was like this, they would probably feel extremely unbalanced. Bailey Hongzhuang saw that everyone was looking at her in shock. She knew that they did not have much understanding of this array. In fact, the formation itself was a rather obscure thing. Most of the cultivators put all their energy into cultivation. No one would study such unorthodox things. Thinking about it, only Bailey Hongzhuang, who was interested in many things, would have the heart to understand this kind of thing. To Bailey Hongzhuang, although there were many things that she was not proficient in, she had a rough understanding of them. This was because to master a skill, it required a lot of time and energy. However, if she only needed to understand a little, it would be much easier. That's right. We have fallen into an array. Only by breaking the array will we be able to walk out. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was calm and certain. Her black jade-like eyes sparkled with a luster that made people believe her. But young palace master, we don't have any understanding of arrays. Pei Yifan could not help but feel anxious. They had only heard of such things before. It was impossible for them to break the array. Long Xianjing and the rest looked at each other. If they knew that there would be an array here, they would rather walk back than be trapped here. Young palace master, arrays shouldn't exist in the Battle of Zhuolu, right? Yan Ao Shuang couldn't help but doubt. It wasn't that she didn't believe in Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment, but this was too unbelievable. If there really is such a thing in the Battle of Zhuolu, not only us, I can guarantee that the other teams won't be able to solve it either. Long Xianjing said with certainty. One had to know that none of the factions would tell the participating disciples about the Battle of Zhuolu. As such, unless some of these disciples were naturally interested in formations, they would be trapped to death. Looking at everyone's suspicious faces, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. It is strange that an array exists in the Battle of Zhuolu. However, I am certain that this is an array. Young Palace Master, how did you determine that this is a formation? Some of the formations are specifically used to trap opponents. Once a cultivator falls into the formation, their sense of direction and everything else will be lost. It just so happened that there was so much miasma here that it was difficult to determine if a formation was set up. If it wasn't a formation but an ordinary miasma forest, would you have gotten lost? The crowd couldn't help but shake their heads. That was absolutely impossible. Chapter 2347. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone thought for a moment. The situation was indeed as Bailey Hongzhuang had said. Before this, they had never encountered such a strange situation. But, if this is really a formation, then what should we do? Li Yangbing's face became incomparably ugly. If they had been trapped in this formation for the past 3 months, not only would they not become famous after they got out, they would also become a complete laughingstock in the eyes of the people. Perhaps, in the future, they would not be able to raise their heads in front of other cultivators. Long Xuanjing's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and asked, "Young Palace Master, do you have some understanding of formations?" If it were them, they would not even be able to tell that this was a formation. Since the young Palace Master was able to determine it, then at least the young Palace Master had a certain understanding of it. Everyone's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, all their hopes were placed on the young Palace Master. "I have already determined the structure of this formation. As for whether it will succeed or not, we still have to try." As soon as these words came out, everyone could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. As long as there was a way, they were willing to give it a try. At least, it was much better than sitting here and waiting for death. It turned out that the young Palace Master had taken out a pen and paper to think of a way to break the formation. Suddenly, everyone understood. "Young Palace Master, just try according to your method." Everyone spoke out one after another. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded, and a serious and dignified look appeared on her delicate and flawless face. "Later on, everyone follow our footstep. As long as there is a slight deviation in the process of breaking the formation, there will be unpredictable consequences." Everyone nodded one after another. They all understood the importance of this matter. After everyone memorized the method of breaking the formation in their hearts, she led everyone forward. "Take 3 steps to the left, 5 steps to the right, 7 steps straight," Bailey Hongzhuang reminded everyone as they walked. This formation was very large. Even she had to calculate for a long time before she could calculate it. Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain amount of confidence in breaking the formation. Everyone followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang, remembering Bailey Hongzhuang's words, not daring to deviate in the slightest. Originally, there were still some worries in everyone's heart, but after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang so skillfully explain the solution, they were relieved. Although this array was larger than the average array, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't spend too much time cracking it. Everyone followed Bailey Hongzhuang and cautiously walked over. Only then did they realize that the miasma in front of them had disappeared. Bailey Hongzhuang turned around to look at the miasma behind her, and a joyful smile appeared on her pretty face. It seemed that her judgment was not wrong. She had successfully walked out of the demonic miasma forest. "Oh my God, we really made it out! I didn't expect this to really be a formation. I didn't know what I was walking on. I only felt that it was a mess. But it turned out that we had been walking in a straight line. This formation is really powerful. If it wasn't for the young Palace Master leading the team, we would really be finished this time." Everyone was overjoyed. All the depression and dissatisfaction in the demonic miasma forest had dissipated. At this moment, they only felt a strong sense of relief. Chapter 2348. "Master, there's nothing you can't do." Baisher's large, clear eyes sparkled and were filled with admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang. Out of the entire team, only Master knew how to break the spell. The rest of the team did not know how to do so. Seeing Baisher's adorable look, Bailey Hongzhuang stroked Baisher's little head and smiled. "Of course, your master is no ordinary person." Baisher rubbed its head against Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and squinted its eyes comfortably. Its heart was filled with pride. Who said that as a beast king, it had made a contract with an ordinary cultivator back then? Now, everyone should know that its master was an extremely powerful person. "Young Palace Master, now that the spell has been broken, we can continue our journey." Long Xianjing smiled. At that moment, He was filled with admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. However, just as they were about to leave, they suddenly heard voices in front of them. Miasma has appeared here. How troublesome. We have to speed up. If we continue at this rate, we'll be left behind by the other teams. Hearing the soft voices in the distance, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest could not help but look at each other. Another team was approaching. We've been in the Battle of the Deer for so long, and we've finally met another team. Pei Yifun's eyes lit up and he lowered his voice. His voice was filled with excitement. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest smiled as well. They had thought that they had stayed for a few days and the other teams would have left by now. They never thought that there would be another team behind them. Young Palace Master, we've finally met another team. Shall we do it? Long Xianjing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. The most important thing in the Battle of the Deer was to obtain the identity card. Now that they had coincidentally met another team and there were no other teams nearby, it was undoubtedly the best time to make a move. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a playful smile. She looked at the crowd and said, "Let's do it." After waiting for so long, they still hadn't found a good opportunity. Now that it had appeared in front of them, how could they miss it? As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, everyone's face showed a smile. Young Palace Master, let's see which team it is first. If it's a strong enemy, we have to be careful. Yan Ao Shuang could not help but remind him. If the other party was very strong, then if they went up, they might be robbed of their identity cards. In this battle for the throne, he could not be blindly confident in his own strength. Bailey Hongzhuang licked her bright red lips and said with a smile, "No matter which force he comes from, this identity card is ours." As soon as these words came out, everyone's expression couldn't help but change a little. They didn't expect the young palace master's style to be so domineering. He didn't care who the other party was and directly decided? It's good to be confident, but if you're too confident, it's very likely that you'll fail miserably. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at everyone's expression and said with a smile, "We've just destroyed this array. Now I'll set it up again and trap them inside. Won't we be in an invincible position? If they could win, then they would fight. If they couldn't, then they could leave the array." However, the other party couldn't. Chapter 2349. Then, under the curious and surprised gazes of the crowd, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly began to arrange the array. Bailey Hongzhuang did not expect to arrange an array during the Battle of Zhuolu, so she did not bring the materials needed to arrange the array. Fortunately, the demonic miasma forest itself was very suitable for the arrangement of arrays. In addition, when Bailey Hongzhuang had cracked the previous array, she had not destroyed the materials, so as long as she found these things, she could still arrange another array. The crowd watched as Bailey Hongzhuang searched around the demonic miasma forest, as if she had X-ray vision, quickly finding everything. Suddenly, the crowd's admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang was like a torrential river. Young Palace Master did not just have a little understanding of arrays, she completely understood them. The crowd stood behind Bailey Hongzhuang with great interest, watching Bailey Hongzhuang arrange the array, but the dazzling appearance made them unable to understand at all. In fact, those who had never been in contact with arrays, even if they watched the other party arrange the array, they would not understand the mystery of it. The crowd just stared at each other, their hearts filled with anticipation of snatching the other party's identity card later. Bailey Hongzhuang arranged the array very quickly, and after she finished the last step, the crowd was amazed to find that the originally clear scene in front of them suddenly changed, as if they had been transported to another environment. The crowd could not help but open their mouths wide. The situation was really too shocking. This is the power of arrays, it's really amazing. Pei Yifun's eyes were full of amazement. Previously, he was inexplicably trapped in the array, and then he followed behind Bailey Hongzhuang and inexplicably walked out. He simply couldn't understand this profound thing. Now that he saw the changes in the array with his own eyes, he finally understood how amazing it was. I'm afraid the other party will be dumbfounded now. Yan Ao Shuang chuckled. Once this method was used, the other party would have no way to break it. Originally, they thought they were the most unlucky, but now it seemed that the other party was much more unlucky than them. The crowd looked at each other and smiled. Their young palace master really had many tricks up her sleeve. The other party was destined to lose at their hands. After Bailey Hongzhuang arranged all the arrays, the crowd could not see what was in front of them, and could not help but turn to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Wait for the other party to go deeper, then we will move. Bailey Hongzhuang sat on the ground, lowered her voice, and motioned for everyone to sit next to her. When we move later, you will do as I say. Just remember the way to go in and out, the other party will not be able to catch up to you. She believed that after snatching the identity card, the other party would be flustered and flustered. How would they remember how they left? As a result, the other party would be trapped in the array. We will follow the young palace master's arrangements. Soon, the array was the array to escape to. The array was like Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, but still could not find the direction. Now is the time we can move. At Bailey Hongzhuang's order, the crowd, who had long been ready, walked into the array, including Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and Bai Shi. Chapter 2350. Bailey Hongzhuang stayed outside the demonic miasma forest. She had to pay attention to everyone's situation. If someone accidentally lost their way, she would be able to point out the direction and rescue them. Although they were not clear about the strength of the other party, they were in the dark while their opponents were in the light. Moreover, their Limitless Palaces team was not weak either. The Heng Mountain Sect's cultivators were in a bad mood. Ever since they came to the Battle of Deer, they felt very unlucky. First, they inexplicably fell into a trap and did not get any treasure. They even spent a few days to get out of it. This was simply a bad start. Originally, they wanted to shine in this Battle of Deer, but they did not expect that their progress was far behind the others. So far, not only did they not get any treasure, they also did not see any other team's cultivators. This made them very anxious. Young Sect Master, we seem to have returned to where we started. At this time, a disciple's voice rang out. Soon, everyone found that the scene here was so familiar. They had clearly been here before. Damn it! We walked all the way, why didn't we find any clues? Heng Mountain Sect's young sect master Feng Qianyi said in a flustered and exasperated manner. Originally, he was very annoyed that he had fallen into this situation. He did not expect to enter this strange miasma forest and go the wrong way. He was simply angered to death. Young Sect Master, what should we do now? What else can we do? Continue to walk. Feng Qianyi's face was cold. This time, everyone pay attention. We must not go the wrong way again. When the Limitless Palace's disciples approached, they heard the other party's conversation. They could not help but laugh in their hearts. At this time, they still could not find any clues. They really did not know anything about arrays. So it's the Heng Mountain Sect's team. Among all the forces, the Heng Mountain Sect belongs to the middle level. If we want to snatch their identity card, it will not be difficult. Long Xuanjing's eyes were filled with confidence. Other than a few strong teams, ordinary teams were no match for Limitless Palace. Yan Aoshuang and the others' faces also revealed a smile. Originally, they thought that although they had obtained treasures in the Battle of Deer, there was no progress in their identity card. They did not expect that when they wanted to sleep, someone would send a pillow to them. As long as they could snatch the opponent's identity card, their harvest would definitely not bad. Let's move, Long Xianjing said. Everyone nodded in agreement. Following which, they had already chosen their targets and were preparing to launch a sneak attack. With the strength of Long Xianjing and the others, a sneak attack would definitely catch the enemy off guard. The Heng Shan Sect's team walked quickly. In the next second, the last person in their team was dragged out with his mouth covered. The other party didn't even have the time to cry out in alarm before the attack of the Limitless Palace's disciple arrived. Very quickly, an identity token fell into the hands of the Limitless Palace disciple. Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and Baisher could not help but smile smugly when they saw this. This kind of sneak attack was really convenient. He could solve all of this without anyone noticing, and he could even preserve his strength. After all they needed was the identity card. Chapter 23:51. Bailey Hongzhuang stood outside the array. She knew the situation inside the array like the back of her hand. Obviously, the other party's strength was not considered very strong in the Battle of Zhuolu. It was only a matter of time before they wanted to snatch the identity tokens. There was no need for her to make a move. She only needed to wait here for a moment, and Long Xianjing and the rest would be able to settle everything. At this time, Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking in her heart. They had already participated in the Battle of Zhuolu for more than 10 days. She did not know when they would be able to meet up with Di Beichen. Originally, she wanted to meet up with Di Beichen as soon as possible after the Battle of Zhuolu. However, looking at the current situation, this was completely a matter of luck. She did not know where the Tiangang Sex team had been teleported to. It would be very difficult to find them. Now, she could only hope that the two teams were not teleported too far away. If they were, then they would only have a chance to meet in the middle of the Battle of Zhuolu. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking, Long Xianjing and the rest had already walked out of the array. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at everyone and found that there were more or less injuries on everyone's body. Even if the other party's strength was not their match, once they exploded, their power could not be underestimated. However, although everyone was more or less injured, their faces were full of smiles. "Young Palace Master, we have already obtained the 10 identity tokens." Long Xianjing took the lead to walk to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and handed the identity tokens to Bailey Hongzhuang. Looking at the 10 identity tokens, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a charming smile. "You guys are too awesome." Bailey Hongzhuang gave everyone a thumbs up. Although she had already known that the result was predestined, the speed of Long Xianjing and the rest still surprised her. "Young Palace Master, if you had not thought of this method, it would have been too difficult for us to obtain the identity tokens with such a small price." Yan Aoshuang was now not only convinced by Bailey Hongzhuang, but also deeply admired her. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang was younger than her, Bailey Hongzhuang's ability made people have no choice but to sigh in admiration. "This proves that our team's strength is very strong." Bailey Hongzhuang was full of smiles. Although Limitless Palace had not been established for a long time, this sudden rise of a new force had surprised many people. "If you have the ability, tell us which power you are from." Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were celebrating, a furious voice came from the demonic miasma forest. Who else could it be but Feng Qianni? Feng Qianni was simply angered to death. This was truly a case of a tiger being bullied by a dog. After entering the demonic of Zhuolu, most importantly after being ambushed, they wanted to chase after the other party, but the other party seemed to know some kind of sorcery. They just took a few steps and disappeared in front of them. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't catch up. This was simply infuriating. Was there anything more strange than this in this world? Hearing this voice, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other and smiled. "Feng Qianni, you have to listen carefully. I am Limitless Palace's young palace master, Bailey Hongzhuang." Chapter 23:52. When Feng Qianni heard the name of Limitless Palace, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He had thought of many possibilities, but he really didn't think that the other party was from Limitless Palace. However, when he heard that the other party claimed to be the young palace master of Limitless Palace, named Bailey Hongzhuang, he had already determined that the other party was deliberately deceiving him. If you want to deceive people, at least find a more believable one. Limitless Palace doesn't have a young palace master at all. If you have the ability, tell us your true identity. The disciples of Heng Mountain sect all glared at the misty person in front of them. The other party stole their things and even dared to laugh at their IQ? Limitless Palace had not been established for a long time, and Palace Master Yu Linfeng was very young, so they had never appointed a young Palace Master. So far, they had never heard of any young Palace Master in Limitless Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang and Long Xianjing looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. This world is so strange. Every time I tell the truth, the other party doesn't believe me. When these words came out, Yan Aoshuang and the others couldn't help but laugh. The other party didn't believe it at all. This was completely beyond their expectations. Believe it or not, it's up to you. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her voice. She had already told the truth. If the other party insisted on not believing it, she couldn't do anything. You made up such a lie that no one would believe to make me believe it. Do you really think I'm a fool? Feng Qianni was even more angry. If he believed such a ridiculous identity, he would really become a joke. What a fool! Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. Heng Mountain sect found such a pig-headed guy to be the next sect master. She felt that the future of Heng Mountain sect was really worrying. Let's go. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her right hand, indicating that everyone should leave. Young Palace Master, are we just going to trap the disciples of Heng Mountain sect in this array? Li Yangbing couldn't help but ask. This array originally existed. I just restored it. If the disciples of Heng Mountain sect can't get out, it can only be said that they are not capable enough. Bailey Hongzhuang answered matter-of-factly. She was not so kind as to release this group of people to be her opponent. Everyone followed behind Bailey Hongzhuang and left. They could not help but mourn for the Heng Shan sect. Who asked them to be so unlucky? It seemed that the Heng Mountain sect was destined to be at the bottom of the Battle of Zhuolu this time. After passing through the demonic miasma forest, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others discovered that a swamp had appeared in front of them. The swamp was so wide that there was no other way except to cross it. Everyone had just passed through the demonic miasma forest, and now that they saw this scene again, they were completely speechless. Isn't this Battle of Zhuolu a little too abnormal? You've practically overcome all obstacles along the way. Xiao He ridiculed. This simply did not give them any time to rest. Questions came one after another. Although Long Xianjing and the others didn't say it out loud, they couldn't help but curse in their hearts. Who was the one who set up this strange test? If this situation continues, I'm afraid that we may not be able to reach the center of the Battle of Zhuolu even after 3 months. The corner of Yan Aoshuang's mouth twitched. Every test took them a long time. Chapter 23:53. If the people outside of the Battle of Zhuolu were to find out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest had only taken a dozen or so days to reach the swamp, they would certainly find it unbelievable. Because, in the previous batches, the teams who had taken this route had not even been able to pass through the first stage. From their point of view, even if a team had managed to pass through the tree demons, once they had entered the demonic miasma forest, they would have no choice but to obediently wait for the Battle of Zhuolu to end before they could rescue them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were now complaining that their progress was too slow. The cultivators who had failed in the previous batches would definitely want to teach them a lesson. If this kind of speed was considered slow, then what were they? Were they trying to torture them to death? Unfortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were completely unaware of this. Bailey Hongzhuang even felt that she had underestimated the cultivators who had taken part in the Battle of Zhuolu. The journey had been so difficult, but the other party had been able to reach the center of the Battle of Zhuolu so early. Their power was evident. Bailey Hongzhuang's inky black phoenix eyes sized up the large swamp in front of her. Her willowy brows furrowed slightly. From her point of view, the swamp was not a difficult problem to cross. However, she felt that the bottom of the swamp was not so peaceful. Master, there are dark currents surging under the swamp. There are demonic beasts present. Baisher's warning rang out in Bailey Hongzhuang's ear. He was very sensitive to the presence of demonic beasts. Even though the fluctuations were very well hidden, he could still sense them. Hearing this, a look of understanding flashed across Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. It seems that the reason for all this lies here. The crowd looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in confusion. They did not understand why Bailey Hongzhuang had suddenly said such a thing out of the blue. Previously, when we had not encountered any demonic beasts, I had determined that there must be some incredible demonic beasts nearby. Previously, when we were in the demonic miasma forest, we did not encounter any demonic beasts either. This means that the demonic beasts must be at the bottom of the swamp. The crowd's expressions slowly changed as they looked at the extremely calm swamp. There did not seem to be any signs of life there at all. Everyone was smart enough to know that this swamp was not just used to deal with them. There must be other tests. Young Palace Master, it's getting late. Why don't we rest here for a while and wait for the sun to rise? Long Xuanjing's expression was solemn and wise. None of the tests here were simple. If they acted rashly, they might suffer heavy losses. I think so too. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head. This swamp was originally a piece of pitch-black soil. If they were to move at night, they would be no different from blind people. On the other hand, the demonic beasts would not be affected at all. Everyone retreated some distance and found a suitable place to rest. After breaking the array and attacking the disciples of the Heng Mountain sect, everyone was very tired. After Bailey Hongzhuang handed over the task of keeping watch to the three beasties, she also began to circulate her cultivation method. She might face a big battle tomorrow, so she had to adjust her state to the best possible state. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang, but the other disciples also seemed to have realized that tomorrow's trial would not be easy to pass. Everyone was adjusting their breathing, restoring their condition to the peak. Di Beichen looked at the gradually falling curtain of night. His long and narrow eyes slightly narrowed. His expression was filled with worry and longing. Chapter 23:54. None of the cultivators in the Battle of Zhuolu were simple characters. The Limitless Palaces team was naturally not weak. However, it was not uncommon for teams to team up in the Battle of Zhuolu. On the contrary, it was very common. With Bailey Hongzhuang's character, if the other party teamed up to snatch the identity token, Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely not back down obediently. That would be dangerous. It was not uncommon for teams to be wiped out in the Battle of Zhuolu. He did not want Hongzhuang to be in danger. Xiao Feilin and the rest could feel Di Beichen's worry. In fact, from the moment they entered the Battle of Zhuolu, Di Beichen seemed to be looking for something. Compared to the other teams, their team's speed was really fast. When Xiao Feilin saw Di Beichen's worried expression, her first thought was that Di Beichen was looking for Bailey Hongzhuang. However, when this thought surfaced, Xiao Feilin immediately killed it. Because that was simply impossible. Bailey Hongzhuang did not even participate in the Battle of Zhuolu. How could the young sect leader be looking for her here? For a moment, Xiao Feilin and the rest could not understand. In fact, there was another person who was in the same situation as Mo Yunjue. Ever since he helped Bailey Hongzhuang save her parents, Mo Yunjue had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang again. Now, the distance between him and Bailey Hongzhuang was getting further and further. Even though he knew that it was impossible, he still wanted to see Bailey Hongzhuang. It was not for anything else. He just wanted to see her and feel at ease. With his character, as long as he wanted something, he would get it even if he had to resort to unscrupulous means. However, when facing Bailey Hongzhuang, he could not do such a thing. Because Bailey Hongzhuang was the only person he cared about in his life, he didn't want to see Bailey Hongzhuang unhappy, not to mention that he was the one who hurt her. He originally thought that if Di Beichen did not treat Bailey Hongzhuang well and dared to hurt her heart, he would definitely teach Di Beichen a lesson. In the future, Bailey Hongzhuang would be under his protection. However, now that he saw Di Beichen treat Bailey Hongzhuang wholeheartedly, his heart was also somewhat gratified, because at least this proved that Bailey Hongzhuang's taste was excellent, and she would not be sad. The only thing he felt was bitterness in his heart. These days, he had always wanted to see Bailey Hongzhuang, but now, he didn't even have a reason to see Bailey Hongzhuang. When the Battle of Zhuolu began, he knew that Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang would participate. This was his chance to see Bailey Hongzhuang again. As long as he could take a look, it would be good for him. At least he wouldn't have to sink into the darkness. His sunshine could not accompany him in the end. Everything was just his greed, right? No matter what, he hoped to meet her sooner. This time, those who participated in the Battle of Zhuolu with Mo Yunjue were all his confidants. So many people knew who Mo Yunjue had always liked. The Tower Master had never cared about any woman, but now this woman actually liked someone else. Everyone could not help but feel indignant for the Tower Master. How many men in this world were as outstanding as the Tower Master? However, the Tower Master had already given them an order. No one could say anything, or they would die without a doubt. Chapter 23:55. Everyone stood up in tacit understanding and slowly approached the swamp. Today, they had to figure out what kind of terrifying demonic beast was in the swamp. No matter how terrifying the demonic beast was, they only had one path, and that was to charge through it. No matter what kind of stumbling block appeared on the road, they had to get rid of this stumbling block. Looking at the calm swamp in front of them, it didn't look like there were any living creatures in it. Everyone couldn't help but frown. Young Palace Master, should we think of a way to pass through this swamp without alerting this fellow, or should we kill this fellow first before passing through the swamp? Long Xianjing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Different situations required different methods. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes. Last night, the place where they were resting was not far from the swamp, but they didn't suffer any attacks. It could be seen that the fellow didn't like to leave the swamp. If they wanted to pass through the swamp without alerting that fellow, it wasn't impossible. However, if that fellow suddenly appeared halfway, everyone would be caught off guard. Of course, there was another important reason. What do you all think of the sacred frost lotus? Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up into a meaningful smile. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Their lips curled up into a smile that was similar to Bailey Hongzhuang's. Young Palace Master, let's do something big. Everyone laughed. Previously, they had spent a lot of effort to deal with the tree demon, but the final reward was also extremely good. Although the swamp in front of them looked a little strange and unfathomable, if they could get rid of this fellow and obtain treasures, then they didn't mind having a big battle. Bailey Hongzhuang's smile gradually widened, and her voice was tinged with a hint of a smile. Looks like our team's character is the same. She didn't need to say it out loud as everyone had already thought of it. The moment these words came out, everyone couldn't help but chuckle softly. Like captain, like team. Now, they were very familiar with the young Palace Master's style of doing things, and this style, they liked it. That's right, young Palace Master. We're all following you now, Li Yangbing said with a smile. Although they hadn't spent much time with the young Palace Master, they liked the simple and crude way of doing things. As a cultivator, there was no need for so much nonsense. Just make a move. In the face of danger, if he had the ability, he would charge in. If he didn't have the ability, he would run. Occasionally, he would sneak in and attack. If there was a treasure, he would never let it go. Haha, then let's go all the way and not let go of any chance of finding treasures. Bailey Hongzhuang laughed wantonly. Every obstacle on this path was not easy to solve. She believed that there would be no shortage of treasures. In fact, everything was just as Bailey Hongzhuang had expected. This was a path that all forces knew was difficult, but at the same time, the treasures on this path were also the most precious. Back then, when a certain freak had set up this path, he had said that only a sufficiently powerful team could pass through this path. If one wanted to obtain good treasures, they had to show sufficient strength. Therefore, a certain pervert had spared no effort in setting up obstacles on this path, but he had also spared no effort in setting up this treasure. Chapter 2356. Long Xianjing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was much younger than him, and his heart was filled with a myriad of emotions. Previously, when the young palace master had not arrived, he had been the one to lead the entire team. Although there had not been any problems with their interactions, they had not been as united as they were now. After the incident with the tree demon and the formation, everyone's admiration for the young palace master had reached a peak. This was because the young palace master was not only daring, she was also intelligent and powerful. With such a young palace master by their side, they did not have to worry about too much. This was because the young palace master had always looked as if she had a card up her sleeve. In the past, Long Xianjing had always felt that his power, talent, and even abilities were not too far off from the successors. However, after witnessing Bailey Hongzhuang's leadership, he finally understood the difference between them. In a short period of time, she had made the entire team submit to her. She was swift and decisive, yet she was a wise leader. This was not something that an average person could do. Let's see what kind of big fellow is in the swamp. Her bright eyes, like obsidian, flashed with a dignified and serious light. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was stained with a bit of calmness and seriousness. Her expression changed so quickly and without the slightest abruptness. Everyone followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Once this big fellow was awakened, they would have to start a great battle. However, they liked this feeling. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Bai Shi and said, "Bai Shi, go." White Lion immediately understood and walked to the front of the group. He looked at the extremely calm swamp and let out a loud roar. Roar! The deafening roar of a beast rang out. Bai Shi was full of energy and even the air seemed to ripple. Bailey Hongzhuang held the colored glass sword in her hand and fixed her gaze on the swamp. This big fellow had not come out so they could only lure it out. As a beast king, White Lion's loud roar would definitely alarm him and make him come out. After Bai Shi roared, he returned to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. He confidently gave Bailey Hongzhuang a look. As long as he made a move, that fellow would definitely come out. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded without leaving a trace. Her gaze was still sharp and sharp. Since White Lion had told her that this fellow's level was very high, it was obvious how powerful this fellow was. Even if all of them joined forces, she could not guarantee victory. After all, the Shengxian continent still had some demonic beasts that were extremely powerful. There's no movement in the swamp. Is that guy unwilling to come out? When everyone saw that the swamp was still as calm as ever, they could not help but guess what was going on. "Don't worry, they'll definitely come out," Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Everyone suddenly put away the doubts in their hearts, and maintained the same appearance as Bailey Hongzhuang, ready to go. Now, everyone no longer had any doubts about the young palace lord's words because all their previous suspicions have been proven by the facts. The young palace lord's words were true. Not too long after Bailey Hongzhuang had spoken, everyone felt a bulge suddenly appear in the middle of the swamp. Then, the bulge grew larger and larger at lightning speed. It was like a small hill growing larger and larger,